On today's episode, we're doing a serious deep dive into cosplay planning. I'm Rob Swackhammer, and this is Make Them Awesome. Folks, hey, it's Rob, and to the right of me, as always, it's Tacocat.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. Same old.
Surviving this really weird-ass timeline like we have been since March, but we're surviving.
Yeah, surviving Zoom University.
Zoom University, yes. And which I add on to by doing this fucking thing over Zoom, but it works, so...
All the Zoom. I probably know too much about Zoom now.
Yeah, I think we're all going to be like Zoom experts by the time we can actually do shit in person again, or at least larger things, I suppose. So today's a very interesting topic, and Whataburger curbside pickup is great. I saw they're actually delivering now, which I was like,
oh, that's great.
I was like, what?
But of course, Luis would be like, the Whata is easier to acquire now.
Yes, definitely. So today's subject, we actually have quite a bit to talk about. And it's technically a singular subject, but there's a lot that goes into it.
There's a lot to it.
So this was a discussion.
I'm pulling up my notes now.
Yes. So this was something... Actually, we had originally discussed as sort of a overall subject, kind of talking about in general tones. But then, as Kirsten and I have started talking about, she just went ham on details. So we kind of actually end up changing it up a little bit there. So what we're talking about today is cosplay planning and all the things you take into consideration when you're planning out a new cosplay. And so, and actually, before we actually dive into some of the details on some of the others that we're going to talk about today.
I'm at my notes now.
What's that?
I'm down the right place on the notes now.
Oh, okay. So one thing I want to ask first, like I said, before we go into the real detailed pulling apart of some of these costumes, is when you first started out, how much planning did you really do? Like with, say, some of your first costumes.
What color fabric, what pattern, what thread, and that was it.
That was it?
There really wasn't much.
So...
And hey, pockets actually I didn't really start adding until recently because I got smarter.
Yeah. So what was maybe the point for you where you were like, hey, I need to actually really put some more thought and really kind of... taking down some more detailed notes to maybe what you should be doing and maybe everything else.
What kind of pushed that, I would say, is doing competition stuff.
Okay.
Because it's far easier to pace out a piece if you have a list and then a pool of information for how you're going to go about finishing that list.
Right. I was going to say, and along those lines, I mean, and I'm going to take it especially from a project management perspective. So from that time of starting out versus say now, what are the things you really try to document first and maybe say like, okay, hey, I should probably do this, I should probably do this, but, how has that progressed over time for you?
So I've definitely started with more research and being like, okay, so for this piece, inspiration from this put that in a little bubble. Okay, so then what fabric do I want to use? Put that in a bubble and just gather the different bits of information like that. So I do a lot of planning ahead of time. And even before I start sewing a costume, I have this weird habit of like, I'll think through the entire process of sewing it to figure out if there's a spot where I'm confused and don't know what to do, or if I don't think my idea will work.
Okay.
So it helps.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because of sport stuff or physics stuff that I do that, but I like to think through the entire construction process before I actually start sewing it.
Well, and that makes sense to me because, like if we were to take our photo projects, we try to do that quite a bit, there. So it makes sense to me to take that step. So why don't we go ahead and get into the costumes, or that will eventually happen, and talk about how you'll pull them apart and then basically put them back together. So we're going to start, let me pop up in here. We're going to start with Emperor Edelgard from Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, right now on the screen, I've got just kind of, one of her main art pieces. But the great thing was apparently there was images, showing her design, especially with the cape off, which, I mean, we know that doesn't always happen. I just realized Tacocat's image did not resize yesterday or earlier.
Oh.
Whoops. Well, that's a quick fix. But anyway.
That's not cool.
So you had a ton of notes for Edelgard.
Yes, I do. I'm actually going to pull up the picture of it so I can have it in front of me.
Yeah.
Too.
So one thing, and this was kind of came out from one of the discussions about the overall questions, was about fabric choices.
Yes,
and
so
how you make those character appropriate and such.
That was one of the things, because I've done a little bit of thinking about Edelgard so far. That's kind of the big spot where I'm at, is what fabric do I want to use? Because she's royalty, she's an emperor, and according to Allie, depending on what track of the game you play, she could be the villain for you. So there's a lot rolled up in her design. I mean, if you look at her, it's not hard to see that, one, she's royalty. She's wearing a lot of red and gold.
Yeah.
Two, because the red and gold, you could see her as a villain. She has that horn thing going on. I mean, that screams villain.
Yeah.
But, so for fabrics that suit a character, it's easy to kind of look at, like, what real people in that position use. So if you look at real royalty, they use really fancy fabrics. That's known. So that's why for Edelgard, I kind of narrowed it down. Okay, yes, purple is royalty, but royalty also wear a lot of red.
Yeah.
I mean, look at their little crowns. They have red in there. Whatever specific crown that is, but I think maybe you know what I'm talking about. But anyways, red and purple are royal colors. They wear lots of that. So my train of thought was, okay, velvet or like a dupioni, maybe a matte satin. I'd probably use a combination of those. Now, which combination? I'm not really sure yet. Because, like, the cape, you probably want to be able to do some cool cape shots with it doing a flip, so you don't want that to be too heavy.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we
go back... And that's kind of bringing in the photography element of what fabric choice do I make?
Yeah, I was going to say, just real quick, I just went back to the first image because it shows, like, just how damn big her cape is in that one, so...
Wow, yeah, it is gigantic.
Yes. So go back to that there. So, and actually, as an extension of that, because you do kind of mention this in here, was with armor and mobility. And also, I kind of want to know for you how, your fabric choices could play into that as well.
Yeah, so some fabrics are heavier weight than others. Like, and this is tying into another point. If you get a swatch of the fabric, you can kind of feel what's heavier. So a dupioni, which I have my fabric wholesale direct red dupionis here. Those are lighter weight than a velvet. And you can tell that just by holding those two. There's the velvet. So if you were to say use velvet for her dress, that is going to be heavier and probably hotter to wear. So then you're going to have to think more about it. Okay, do I wear undergarments that are going to help with me not being too hot to try and make it more breathable?
Yeah.
Or maybe it goes into, okay, am I going to make it so that I can pull part of this off easily when I need to take a break?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, eating beans. Spam bot message in there. So, and actually to that point, because that's one thing we always have to consider here, because we live in Texas, and Texas summer is a poison status. How the fabric choices play into that as well, versus the look.
Well, and especially like, say, you wanted to use a silk velvet for Edelgard to be real extra. I mean, silk velvet is very nice. I was telling you that, um, like the way the fabric looks, there's more depth to the silk velvet with how the light bounces on it, while um, the micro velvet just kind of absorbs everything.
Yeah, actually, hold on a moment. So, just hey, Luis. Actually, don't turn on followers only for right now. We'll just tag bots as we go. So,
Cool.
yeah,
And then, so these are not for Edelgard, they're something else, but getting these kind of made me realize, oh, maybe that would be real nice to use. But if you use silk fabrics, and Silk Baron has a page about the care of it, they specifically mention you want to be careful with your lining choice because oils from your skin can damage that fabric pretty easily.
really, I did not know that.
Yeah, compared to like a polyester, because a polyester is synthetic, silk is not a synthetic; it's a natural fiber.
Yeah,
So yeah, you have to be careful with what you line it with. But you could also line it and then maybe you wear something underneath that's a breathable fabric, but also meant to just act as another barrier between your skin and your fancy fabric. Because if it's $20 to $30 a yard, you want to be careful with it. You don't want to damage it.
yeah. Sorry, side conversation with Luis there. So, I was gonna say, and here are your notes here. Because now that we've gone through the fabric piece of it, let's talk about the armor aspect for here.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you actually tackle the armor for Edelgard? Because I know, you were also thinking about Warbler. Some people might consider Eba foam, but there's always so much to consider about both of those.
So personally, because of how sleek her armor design is, it's not a bulky like World of Warcraft armor.
Mm-hmm.
I would lean more towards Warbler, and I probably would just do like Warbler and not Warbler wrapped around foam because that makes it quite chunkier.
Yeah.
Which,
like anything from damn near anything from Ebon Blade.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at over there was the Ebon Blade, and like there's ways you can do a lot of cool stuff with that too. There was some cool stuff actually Wigwig Cosplay was talking about the other day during one of their panels for a convention, for if you want to make it look more just like a sheet metal armor and use just a layer or maybe 2 layers of Warbler for that.
Right.
So it is definitely doable. You can still paint it, shape it. You can do all the same stuff to it. The difference is you just won't have it, bulked up from your skin.
Right. Well, I was saying, depending on the armor design, like some I'm seeing with her, it's it's not super bulked up. So in that case, that would potentially work.
Well, I mean, like if you look at her leg armor and her
let me go back to the first image thing.
Bracer stuff.
Yeah.
It is not very thick.
No, it's not.
It looks really thin.
Yeah.
And so even if you used 1/4-inch foam and you wrapped it in Warbler, I'd argue that that's going to be too thick.
It might be. I would agree with that.
So, because honestly, you would have your shoes, whatever you wear otherwise, I don't know, like if you put leggings underneath or however, whatever you attach your armor to.
Right.
And then you have the armor itself. You're at how many layers down? How thick is that going to look? Yeah. Again, you look at like the legs. Her legs aren't very like bulky armor look. They're they have the general leg shape of the curve and taper in to the ankle and all of that.
Yeah. So, and you have, like I said, there's a ton here. One thing you actually mentioned was patterning options, which actually,
real quick.
Yeah.
About the armor again, though. Before we move to the next thing.
Yeah.
That there are a lot of different resources you can look into for how to work with if you just want to do Warbler instead of Warbler on foam or just foam. There's all of the cosplay senpais that do their tutorials, like Kamui Cosplay, Kinpatsu. I think Evil Ted probably has foam. Yes, they do have foam stuff.
I was gonna say I know Weirers had some.
Who do foam and Warbler tutorials.
Yeah.
So, and if you're specifically asking someone who's made this costume, just be nice about it. Don't just be like a weirdo.
Yeah, please don't. We have enough of that shit already.
They won't like that.
Yeah. So, patterning So, now thankfully with the internet and having so many people who are, putting out good products as far as patterns, that's one thing. You might actually have a resource to go get a pattern from somebody.
Yeah, for this, there's a lot of options. There's one, the standard option of, okay, find a commercial pattern, alter it to fit the costume. 2, pattern it yourself. 3, specifically for a lot of the Fire Emblem stuff, there's someone on Instagram that I found whose name is Indigo Ginger. You want to type the name in the chat? This is going to be her Instagram handle. She's made a ton of Fire Emblem patterns, and the people I've seen use these love her patterns.
Okay.
And she has a wide variety of sizes, and she does like different versions of each character. So she has Emperor Edelgard, she has the student one, she has the dancer outfits, she has the student and time skip for other people. So she has a whole bunch of different patterns you can use. And like I said, I also follow people who've used her patterns.
Okay.
And have said that they are lovely. And sure, they may have done minor alterations to make it fit their body shape.
Right.
But overall, the effort that went into that pattern and the instructions was amazing.
Well,
because she doesn't just make a pattern and post it. She makes the pattern, makes the full costume to test it and figure out the best way to do it, and then posts it.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, and I know like one pattern you have taken and used quite a bit, has been the fukus from Cosmic Coterie. There's a great example there for you, especially. So, I was going to say, we did actually kind of talk about technique to a point, because we talked about foam or warbler for armor. Though we do actually have a few more, especially, with embroidery, because we've actually talked about that, a lot recently, with the giveaway and everything, and it seemed like that was an area a lot of people were interested in.
Can you flip back to the other image?
Yeah.
That one will be helpful for talking about this. And also, before we move away from patterning, so mock-ups are extremely important. Because that will help you figure out, does this pattern fit me? And if not, how can you make it fit you?
Yeah.
And something I was telling Rob earlier is that for a mock-up, when you try it on or when you're making the pattern, because I tend to do like the cling wrap and tape method for patterning, it's just what I do because I usually like to make it myself, though I am heavily tempted to buy Fire Emblem patterns from that seller because her patterns look great. So the big thing with mock-ups is whatever undergarments you're going to wear with it, whether it's shapewear or corset, wear it when you are making that pattern and wear it when you are testing that pattern. Because, like, if I were to put that corset on, or the bodice on without the corset that I'm going to wear under that, it's not going to fit right. And I'd be like, oh no, I need to change it. But then I wear the corset with it, and it's not going to fit right. Because, you have two different body shapes, essentially, when you wear your shapewear versus your normal one.
This is why this is cosplay planning, people.
Cosplay planning. And another thing that I had to make sure I did for Glinda is, so her petticoat almost touches the ground. Usually for ball gowns, it's like an inch or maybe an inch and a half off the ground. And so that's the petticoat and the skirt. Well, if you don't have the shoes you're going to wear when you're making your petticoat and putting the waistband on, and then when you do the skirt, how can you know if it's going to hit at the right spot? So it's very important to actually have your shoes when you're working on mock-ups and everything, rather than what I used to do, and shoes was like one of the last things I took care of. So don't do that, especially if it's a ball gown. Really don't do that, but we'll talk about that more with Anastasia.
Yeah. So. And actually, going on to the next one, because we're talking about techniques here, especially for Edelgard. One I was actually interested about for me, I mean, the 3D printing thing I can kind of get, especially with her headpiece there. So that one's like kind of obvious, would take some piecing together.
Well, and like her little buttony things that are too around the top of her costume. You could even 3D print and like you could mold and resin cast the buttons for her cape, or it's up to you what you do.
I was gonna say, and that's another thing too, is like the look of either one of those methods. what that could potentially look like. And then one, especially for her, I think this might be a good one because I'm curious where specifically you would tackle this, is with embroidery and gold work, and probably with the cape, like the bottom of the cape, I could see as a potential.
That's actually not where it would be. The bottom of the cape down there, that I would probably just do a nice trim.
Okay.
And same thing with those little pleated, I don't know what to call those things on the shoulders of the cape.
Yeah.
So if you know what those are called, please let me know. I don't know right now.
Epaulets.
Epaulets? Okay, I wasn't sure if that was it because it was on a cape. Like, I know that's what it is on, like, a uniform.
Uniform, yeah.
But I wasn't sure if this had a different name because it was on a cape.
I'm just going to go with that term. Fuck it. So.
Okay.
Junji. Oh, God.
So if you look on her back, I think it's like an eagle, that gold eagle. I don't know if you can zoom in on the cape.
Not here now.
Oh, darn. Okay, so that is actually where I would say your options for that design could be gold work, embroidery, you could applique it, you could paint it. So what you do is going to kind of depend on, how much do you want to put in? Are you using this for a contest, or is it just something to crank out and have fun with your friends in?
Right.
Personally, since I'm trying to learn more gold work to work towards costumes in the future, because this is another thing in planning to talk about later. So remind me to talk about that later, like selectively choosing your costumes to fit your goals.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll say more on that. Yeah, I would probably do gold work for that eagle thing on the back of her cape.
Okay.
Which, because if you look up royalty, it's pretty common to see gold work involved in whatever, like, formal wear they have, whether it be gowns or the dress uniforms, or even just some of the high-ranking military in history. Around the collar, they have gold work.
Especially
maybe on the
in
sleeves,
their dress uniforms and such, yeah.
So that's why I would probably lean to that, because that just adds like that extra little fancy bit to it. And again, it suits her because she's royalty.
Yeah.
So, but you could do a nice applique or paint it on nicely. Just depends what you want to put into it.
Yeah.
So I like to be extra, so I'm probably going to do gold work.
Yeah. Which
that ties into something that someone actually responded as a question about how to tackle new techniques. So the biggest thing is trial and error. So don't just jump in to your costume wanting to do gold work. Play with it beforehand, and that's what I'm actually doing now. So this is a little butterfly. Okay, you can kind of see it. So it has a couple of different methods of, different techniques of gold work in it. And I played around with this. So this is definitely not perfect because this half with the wire, I hardly stretched it. While this part, I stretched it out a little more because it's like a spring that you need to stretch out when you work with it. It's kind of weird. Like, why don't they just make it partially stretched?
Who knows?
I don't know, but you have to kind of stretch it.
Yeah.
So I did pretty much no stretching on this half, and the thread broke a lot, even though it was waxed, and all of these little corners in here were a pain to do, and it looks really weird. Like, again, I'm gonna have to change the focus on this, or actually, maybe if I just turned this off, it will look a little better.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these corners are pretty messy because of that tight coil. Now, for this half, like I said, I stretched it out a little bit more, and it was my thread didn't break once on this wing, and the corners look a lot nicer.
Yeah. Well,
so
well, I was gonna say,
go ahead.
And real quick, because since we're talking about new techniques here, and this was something you and I discussed earlier, was if you want like a way just to try to test things out, just go to like your local thrift store. B, if you've got a creative reuse joint, like we have one here in Austin that we both love.
Hey, I was planning on talking about them actually. Where's my thing?
Yeah, and that was what made me think about. And C, like maybe just even hit up the clearance sections, just like randomly look for stuff. It's like, I haven't, like say Joanne or Michael's, and just be like, oh hey, I hadn't thought about using this before. Why not just see what happens and just go from there? So. Because I know, like for you,
like for gold work, at least in terms of the wires and stuff we use, it's a little harder to find that, at least from what I've seen in Joann's in person.
Right.
You can find thread that is kind of like the Japanese / K thread. It's thread with like a foil wrapped around it.
Right.
What I found isn't as thick as what I've gotten on Etsy. But I mean, I was actually able to find a pretty large thing of the Japanese / K thread at our local reuse store for $1 when what I got online is this little thing that's 10 yards. I paid about $10. That other thing, it's probably like this big and that far, like the diameter of it is probably like that.
Wow.
I got it for $1.
Damn.
So yeah, I'm probably, if I do a lot of that, the couching technique, which is like you lay it down and stitch it like thread over it to hold it in place. So you're not taking that thread and actually going in and out of the fabric.
Yeah.
That might actually be what I use on Zelda for her little tabardy thing, because I want to put gold work on it. Because again, I'm trying to learn more with that, so that future costumes I have that background. But yeah, new techniques. Doing small sample work is going to help you.
Yeah.
And because like I said, you can play with it like I did with the wire to see what works and what doesn't work. And if this butterfly doesn't end up perfect, that's perfectly fine. It's just a random butterfly.
Yeah.
It's not a costume that I'm going to pay for photo shoots in. I'm not going to enter it in a competition. Because by the time you do a competition, someone who both follows, aka Weeru, and one of the things he's said about this was, when it comes to a contest, you don't want to try and learn as many new techniques as possible. You want to do techniques you are good at. Because you can do a whole bunch of techniques, but you do for each one of them, and then overall your costume's
Yeah.
So, discount season happens. Wow, Luis, it's experimenting.
Yeah.
Like Rob said. But yeah, so when was it that I saw him say that? I don't know if it might have been the WCS streams that he did. But yeah, so by the time you get to, okay, this is a competition piece, I want to do this, and usually if you enter a contest, you want to do well and you want to put your best costume forward, right? So yeah, it's definitely worth it to do your little random projects before your big project.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it will show. I mean,
yeah.
I've done things where it's been like I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to do it and wing it.
Yeah.
But had I done more tests before that, the final product would have been way better.
Oh, yeah. I would definitely believe that. So for Edelgard here, because we've actually covered quite a bit here. So, and actually to a point we've kind of already talked quite a bit about the part breakdown, but I know there's a few others we haven't talked about was, any potential undergarments.
Yeah, so the way I actually did this was the way I would go about constructing it, so it's going to be worth it to talk about each thing on this list. So undergarment wise, again, you can have your shapewear or a corset, whatever you want to wear, if you want to wear something like that. But if so, make sure you have that figured out first before you go to the next steps.
Right.
So if you look at her skirt, it foofs out a bit, and it has that kind of like an A-line-ish shape to it.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something underneath there foofing it out, whether it's a petticoat or like a short crinoline cage hoop skirty thing going on. But so one of those options, or well, if you do the cage, you're going to want a petticoat over it. Otherwise, your boning wires will show through. So
yeah,
petticoat or petticoat plus cage would get you that shape. And there's plenty of places online where you can see about patterns for how to make different shapes of cages, and I will talk more about that for one of the later costumes.
Okay.
But so once you figure out undergarments / shapewear and how the heck you're going to make your skirt foof, then the next thing I would do is the white skirt with that gold stripe on it. Which that should be pretty straightforward. It's a skirt. I would just put it on a waistband.
Yeah.
It's nothing crazy. But then there would be the red dress, or actually, you could like build the white skirt into the dress. So it's a couple of options for how many parts do you want it to break apart into.
Yeah.
You know, because let's see. Yeah, because it doesn't show you whether or not that white skirt is actually a part of her dress. So you could build that into the dress or make it its own separate piece. For the sake of washing stuff, I would probably make the white one separate, because then I can wash the white by itself.
Yeah.
And by wash, I mean probably hand wash.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think any of my costumes I've ever just chucked them into the washing machine. At least I don't think. Maybe there's some if it was just cotton, but for the most part, I wouldn't put any of that stuff in a washing machine. I would hand wash it.
I sure as hell wouldn't. So,
like, I don't like sailor fukus, which that's what this is right here. Those I will wash it like partially in a bathtub and then rinse it down in the shower and let it drip dry and all of that. But yeah, so because of cleaning and whatnot, I would probably make the white skirt separate from the dress, because if I'm gonna get anything dirty, it's gonna be the thing that's white.
Oh yeah.
And if I get that wet and put it near something red, it might bleed.
Yep.
And I don't want the white to turn pink.
Yeah.
So then after the dress, I would work on the cloak. And personally, what I think I would probably spend more time patterning and figuring out is probably the cloak.
Really? Okay.
I haven't made fancy cloaks like that. Like, I've done very basic capes that are like half circles.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not that I recall. So.
No, I definitely haven't. So that's probably where I'd spend more time experimenting with patterning, or if I wanted to, I could go on Etsy and buy a pattern already for that cape and not have to do as much experimenting. I'd probably just do a mock-up to make sure with my shoulders and my height it looked right.
Yeah.
So then after the cloak was done, you have the smaller things, which you could have actually done elsewhere, which would be her armor, so for her shoes, her gauntlets, and little hand things. Which, if you do the hand things, you probably want a glove underneath to attach it to.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to the other image because it's a little clearer. On
yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so the things like the armor for her hands and her leg armor, you could have done that at whatever step, like the shoes, as long as you had, well, for the leg armor, as long as you had the shoes, because it looks like there's some plate on top of like the top of her foot.
Yeah.
So you'd want to make sure you had the shoes, and then you could do that. And for the hand armor, you could do that without having the glove, but you wouldn't be able to do final positionings until you had the glove.
Yeah.
But that's not too dependent on the rest of the costume. So those could have been done whenever. But one thing that is a big, well, there's two things that are, you want to do this before you do this. That's going to be the dress before the cape, because the cape is going to attach to the dress somehow. And you're going to probably have to, well, I'm going to have to do a lot of experimenting with how heavy that cape's going to be to make it stay in place.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be a lot of buckles in there hidden. And then the other thing is going to be styling the wig before you do anything about the headdress.
Yeah.
Because she has those like big old space buns on the side of her head. And, well, those horns come out from the buns and then connect to that center
the tiara
thing.
Kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to call it, because it's just weird.
Yeah, who knows?
It's a very villain-worthy headdress.
It's a Fire Emblem game. Come on. It's like any costume in Fate Grand Order. Come on. So.
But yeah, so whether or not you do foam, warbler, 3D design for that headdress, you're going to want the wig styled beforehand, because like I can make that headdress to fit my head, but then when I try to have wig hair that goes out to here, it's not going to fit.
Yeah. Well, and actually, to that point, let's talk about 3D printing, especially for something like that. You know, especially considering we have to have the design consideration for the wig. And I'm going to go back to the other one because you can kind of see it a little bit more here. Just the actual physical size of the headpiece. How do you consider weight in that regard, especially with 3D printing?
So if it was 3D printing, it'd actually be really easy. Oh, why did my thing
Why
go
did yeah
suddenly
your
very
white balance
yellow?
just like your
I
white
don't know what
balance
it
just like
did.
went super
Oh, that's
weird. That
weird.
was
Now it's going back normal. All right.
you had
Zoom's
jaundice
being
for
weird.
about 10 seconds. I don't know. But...
So 3D printing, there's actually a setting you can control for how much is on the inside. So that's going to be your infill percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So most prints are fine around like a 10 or 15%.
Right.
If it's something that's gonna be like undergo more force and pressure, then you're gonna want to go higher infill.
Right.
Almost went full Galaxia. That's funny. So like, where did I put it? Here we go. So how much do you think this weighs?
Well, I was gonna say I've picked it up, so.
Oh, you have? Okay,
Yeah,
then that doesn't really work.
um,
But in all odds, this probably looks heavier than it is. And I can easily hold this on my pinky, and it is nothing.
yeah,
My cat could probably drag this around. Now, would I want them to? No, because they'd probably break it,
yeah,
because they're heathens. But so that headdress actually wouldn't weigh more than this,
Okay.
because I probably printed this on 15% infill. That's
Was
what
it
I do
15?
most of my
Okay.
stuff on.
Well, okay, I was wondering what was the infill on that one. So.
Yeah, I think it's probably 15 would be my guess.
Okay.
So, because depending on what program you use, you can control the infill. And yes, this is the Naifu, the Naifu waifu from it's Xalatath from World of Warcraft. If you don't know who Naifu is, get a hold of your life. It's your favorite talking knife. It's not creepy at all.
Yeah.
So you have settings to control what the infill is, and I wish I had one of my things that didn't fully print out. I should have grabbed one.
Yeah,
I have
because I
them
know
in
you've
my
seen.
room.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, and I know when you did Naifu, I think you actually had put some work in progress images to kind of show a little bit of the cutaway for it while you were putting it together.
Yeah,
so.
actually, if you want to distract for a minute, I can go grab something that shows infill.
I'm not gonna
No?
worry about it. 'Cause
Okay.
We'll probably
So,
cover that some. Like if we ever do like a more deep dive 3D printing discussion, I think that'd be good. For
I don't
that,
have any
so.
partial printed stuff out here right now. If you do 3D printing, you always end up with partials for whatever reason your saying
Yes.
stopped or you had to stop it. It happens, it's life. So I have a whole bunch of them, just not with this 3D printer. But it will be like a triangle or like a square kind of shape.
Mhm, yeah.
And if you up that, it basically makes that grid smaller, so there's more plastic going inside of it.
Yeah.
But there's also settings where you can control how thick that outer wall is. So you could do a 10, 15 inside fill, but then maybe like 3 or 4 layers for the outside.
Yeah.
So that your outer shell is stronger.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably plenty of YouTube videos that talk more in depth about playing with that. Or if you have a 3D printer, just play with it. PLA is pretty cheap. So, and quick note, this, while it looks pretty like, oh my gosh, this took forever to do, it actually only took like an hour. I'm trying to see, where did I put that little thing I had? Here we go. And most of the techniques that went into making this went into this.
Yeah.
Same basic stuff. While 3D printing Xalatath could seem, oh my gosh, how do I do that? If you learn the basics, that will be plenty to go to something like this.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, like when I started with Tinkercad, learned basics there, then went into Fusion 360, watched a few videos about some special features that had that wasn't in Tinkercad, and well, I can do this now.
Yeah, exactly.
So part of it's just, playing with it. Just like with Goldwork, how you're gonna do, if you want to get into it, you should do a small thing, play with it, see what works. It's the same thing with 3D design and printing.
So there's one last thing we want to cover with Edelgard here, because this was a big thing, especially when I was talking about this whole concept with you, about the overall concepts, was about accuracy versus physics. Especially also with regards to comfort.
Mostly
as well.
directed towards her axe that is ridiculous. Is it in the main picture?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so that thing is gigantic. Whatever way you make that, whether it's foam, Warbler, or 3D printing, well, you're gonna have fun because it's gonna be really heavy towards one end, and you
Yeah.
aren't gonna want it to break off.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to figure out, okay, how can I make this thing work with physics? And it's the same thing with the cape, actually. Like
Yeah,
how I
that's
was saying,
actually the
I'm
big
probably
thing I
gonna
was
have to
thinking
have a
of.
whole bunch of buckles underneath in order to keep that on.
Yeah, I
And
was
I'll
gonna say.
probably have like cross straps and whatnot to help, you know, distribute and hold it in place.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say the same thing for her headpiece as well. It's like, how do you
Hmm.
keep that in
Well,
there?
actually, I'd probably for those horns, I would just wire that into the wig.
Okay.
Floral wire is great. Like my Bowsette, those horns, they just have a little bit of floral wire, and you stick it in and twist it around the wefts, so that sucker won't fall off unless your wig falls off.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, and actually, Ryan brings up a good point here about the axe. Is you a counterweight.
Hmm.
So, even though I would probably need like to see a full size like side view of it, or well, I should say front view, because
Yeah, it's hard to tell exactly like how long it's supposed to be,
yeah,
because I think I've seen some pictures where it looks really tall, but then there's others where it looks shorter.
yeah. So apparently Kirsten, apparently what you need to do is start playing Fire Emblem and actually see it in game.
Okay, I kind of want to get the game, but at the same point, I'm like, if I get the game, I'm gonna spend even more time playing my Switch than I do right now, because I'm doing a island overhaul on Animal Crossing, and I'll get to the perfect island eventually.
Oh Jesus.
It's a void you get sucked into, and I'm sure Ryan has felt that too.
Oh,
I don't know if
I
he's
know.
played lately.
Well, I was gonna say I know Rizuki has been doing some of that as well. So, okay. So so a lot of what we talked about Edelgard will actually feed into some of the other costumes we're going to talk about
Hmm.
today. So let's move on here. This was actually Hannah Alexander's redesign of Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle, uh, which I know you're all about Hannah's designs. Just
Yes.
um,
I
though
love her designs. They're pretty.
though this one it's very interesting because it's very well. One, Hannah's always had an Art Deco lean in on a lot of her
Hmm.
art in
She
general.
does a lot of Art Nouveau
Yeah,
inspired.
Art Nouveau as well. Um, so this one was, was definitely very interesting to talk about when I look, just looking at the detail. And sadly, I don't really know the character because I just haven't seen that film. But
Oh, wow, Rob. Your nerd card is revoked.
yeah, I'm nerdy about a bunch of other shit. Fuck off. So how would let's see here. This is another great one where we're talking about fabric choices, especially for the right kind of flowy look,
Hmm.
as you put in the notes.
So for this one, I would go with more of like, I don't know. I like matte satin, so maybe matte satin, the Dupioni, something that drapes really nicely.
Hmm.
So like that on there, that's a matte satin. It has decent drape to it.
Yeah.
Though actually, what I'm going to use for Sophie is some Dupioni that I got at a thrift store because I got like 8 yards for pretty cheap. I have it somewhere over there. Which that's another thing that ties into like the mock-ups and whatnot. You might think, oh no, I'm gonna waste a lot of fabric, but you can make mock-ups pretty easily with fabric from a thrift store, whether it's a sheet or not.
Yeah. I
So
know a lot
yeah,
of people go
back
that
to the
route.
fabric choice.
Yeah.
I would do something that has a nice amount of flow to it. So
Hmm.
you could do a satin. What kind of satin you do depends on what you want. Do you want a shiny look or a matte look? Personally, most of the time I prefer the matte look than the shiny.
Yeah.
Um, Especially if your shiny option is like the cheap glitter bug fabric at Joann's. That fabric is not very soft. You're not gonna like wearing it.
Ah.
Yeah, it's like very itchy. Well, not necessarily itchy, but I mean, if you just went and bought fabric online, like this satin, this is matte satin, it's Lemoore, or even like what I got for Eternal Sailor Moon, I don't think this was more than $5 a yard, which the color
Okay.
looks really screwy on here, but it's probably the same price as the stuff in store, and it looks a lot nicer. And
Hmm.
this actually would be a good option because it has a good amount of flow to it. It's pretty lightweight.
Yeah. Well, and actually, so to continue on with the fabric choice here, because this was another one of my overall questions I had for this whole stream, was about dyeing it, because we know Hannah is actually really big about her ombre color schemes
You love
here.
ombre.
So, and this is, no exception whatsoever. Though
Hmm.
in this particular example, I mean, it goes a pretty long way along the skirt.
So, when it comes to wanting that kind of a color, you have a few options. One, you can try to like buy fabric that is printed. So Spoonflower, I know there's a couple of people in the Hannah Alexander Facebook group. Ow, just like stepped on a pin.
Oh,
So there's a couple of people in there that will try to design fabric that has the right ombre. So that could be one thing. Though if you go that way, their cotton is $17 a yard. So how much is their satin and their other stuff? Probably $20 or $30 a
really?
yard. Yeah, and it's not like you're working with the silk fabric. So like the stuff from Silk Baron, their Dupioni's 18 a yard.
Mm,
Their velvet, I think, is like 25, and maybe it's 30.
right.
Either way, some range like that. So personally, I wouldn't go the Spoonflower route because I could get nicer fabric for that same cost.
Yeah.
I would just have to dye it myself. So that's the second option then, is dyeing it. But if you're going to dye it, you need to know what kind of content is that fabric. Is it polyester or is it a natural fiber?
Yeah.
So this was a polyester, so I had to use Rit Dye More in order to do that. I used it in super pink and whatever their Rit Dye More purple color is, because I did the pink ombre on the skirt that you can see that goes up to like here-ish,
Yeah.
right there. And then I went ahead and went over in purple.
Okay. Well, and actually to that point, real quick, because this is another thing. Zelda's a great example. Sophie's going to be a great example as well. So, how was it when you consider the size of it? What's the actual? How do you actually go about doing that? Something that big? Because I know you've done wigs, but wigs are relatively small
So
comparatively.
the answer to this will vary on who you ask.
Okay.
Some people will dye their fabric in sections beforehand and then sew it. However, the reason I don't like that is your gradients might not line up properly.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
like
can
the
definitely see.
seam to the side there, the purple might go to a different point on it.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the purple lines up, but when the purple lines up, the pink doesn't line up.
Yeah.
So what I did for that skirt is I sewed the outer layer and the inner layer is separate. It is also dyed. Then there's the outer layer that's dyed. So I sewed them together, and I had to like weirdly hold it because the train on this, so which this design and that design, you wouldn't want to just dunk it whatever distance from the waist, because if you do that in some spots, your purple is going to go up like this high. While
Yeah, I
the
was
front
gonna say
is
you
gonna
have
go
to really
this
kind
high.
of tilt it in some way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so what I did for that is like I had the front of it and then I had the train kind of pulled up a little bit so that the bottom was kind of level.
Mm-hmm.
That way I had, say, a constant, I don't know, 13 inches of purple,
Right.
you know? So Sophie, you would want to do something like that too, because if you only went to the heights required for the front of that skirt,
Mm-hmm.
then like the bottom half of your skirt is all going to be that light purpley color.
Yeah.
And that's probably not what you want. So you'd have to kind of hold it weirdly to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, that is dyeing it once it's been partially sewn is my preference, because then it properly lines up.
Okay.
But I mean, someone else will probably tell you don't do that. So
Yeah, and I mean, and also we can kind of see the same thing for her sleeves, but her sleeves would be a little bit simpler as well. So
yeah, so that you could probably you could sew it first and dye it, or just dye the fabric, because like the sleeves on here that you can't really see, it's just a rectangular piece.
Yeah.
So I folded that a couple of times so that the sides matched up. That way the side seams, if I sewed them together, the dye
they
would
would
be
be
the same
fine.
height.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that would make sense.
It just kind of varies what shape you're working with,
Mm-hmm.
and if there's a way to easily fold it so the dye goes the same height.
Okay. So one thing I'm kind of wondering about here also, even though I could probably make some guesses, it would be the details along the bottom edge.
So for that, um, a lot of Hannah Alexander designs either have like rhinestones, beading, or sequins.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I'd probably do like, oh boy, this is, I haven't quite thought of how I want to do that yet because I would probably want to do rhinestones, but of rhinestones, you have options. There's like the flat back glue on
Mm-hmm.
kind, or you can get the kind that come with the little facing. I think they call it the claw or whatever. It
Mm-hmm.
holds it in place, which I have some of them down here, maybe. Okay. So this is the flat back.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's just a flat back. You put glue, you stick it on. While the other option is 1 second for me to get to Glinda, unless maybe I have some in my little sequin thing. I think I do. Yes, I do. So this looks a lot nicer depending on what your goal is. So it has a little facing on it, like jewelry does. And there's little channels where you would put the thread through to sew it. Oh, if I don't throw it, where you put thread through to sew it down.
Okay.
However, you run into, okay, how long do I want to spend on this costume?
Yeah.
It would be faster to, drop glue, put a rhinestone, drop glue,
Mm-hmm.
put a rhinestone. Or you sew every single one of these on by hand. But you actually have another option as well, which could, if you have a Cricut, you could use the Cricut to cut this design out. And then say you wanted to dress it up a little, you could then put some glue on rhinestones on top of that.
Yeah.
Or Allie would probably definitely be like, Cricut is the way to go.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame you for that. That's what I'm gonna do for the bottom design on Zelda, is the Cricut, and then I'll go rhinestone crazy. Luis, I do enough torture with details and other things. Besides, there's plenty of hand sewing on this costume elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, that actually, to that point, that was another thing I was going to start putting up, and eventually it'll lead into another subject in here. Was I was also worrying about actually the undershirt because like a good chunk of the top I can kind of get, but if we look at the detail on her, I guess you would call that an undershirt. I'm not sure what that's correct.
Before we go to that, I actually want to talk about the patterning for it.
Yeah. Well, that's the bit I was going to lead into here.
And then we'll go to the details on it.
Okay.
So when I saw this initially, I was like, oh, this either looks, I don't know, puffy sleeves, high neck, maybe late Victorian, Edwardian kind of thing going on historically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, minus the high-low thing going on with the skirts, because oh no, she's showing some leg.
Well, I was gonna say, and that was one thing I got from it overall was it's a very like 1910s kind of look, you know. So that makes sense.
Which I think 1910s might be Edwardian.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
I believe so. Or like at the very end, I think. Yeah.
Okay. But so when it comes to doing that, you could pattern it yourself. Or if you have books kind of like the Patterns of Fashion, there's things in there that show line art for the different shapes that you could scale up to fit you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Oh no, the ankles.
Yeah.
How scandalous. So yeah, you have like the Patterns of Fashion. You could get probably through some historical pattern companies like Truly Victorian or American Duchess. They have patterns that are similar to that style of construction that you could tweak to work.
Yeah.
So now for that centerpiece thing, personally, I would make that part of the top and not like its own separate layer.
Okay.
Because I would do a panel where I would probably put like some skin tone fabric behind it and then put the sheer on top of that and just layer it to make it look like it is just a sheer layer, but because we're either going to be beading, sequining, gluing rhinestones on, or cricket design, you don't just want it to be that sheer layer. It's not going to like the weight of that.
Yeah.
So that was my workaround is, okay, you back it with something that's stronger. So yeah, that design, I would, oh boy, I feel like I wish I had one of my bigger pictures that I could zoom in on.
Yeah.
Because it looks like some of those things are shinier than the other, which if it is, that's when I would use wherever I put the rhinestone, like the sew-on rhinestone for the shinier, bigger ones.
Right.
That's what I would put there.
Okay.
And then in between, you could maybe do beading, sequining. Okay, probably not sequins. That might look a little out of place with the other things. I'm just reminded by sequins because I have sequins all over because of Glinda. Like literally, here's some loose on my table. Sequins are everywhere.
Go figure.
Yeah, there's so many sequins that have spilled in here. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, basically you have the same options for top as you do for the skirt. You don't necessarily have to do the same thing for each of those. It's okay to mix and match.
Right. Okay.
Like Zelda's an example of that. The little design at the bottom of her skirt, I'm going to use heat transfer vinyl for that.
Okay.
And iron that on, and then I'll put the trim and all that on the skirt. But for her little tabard with the design on that, I'm going to do gold work for that. But that kind of related into the choice I made for the heat transfer vinyl. I'm going with the more metallic one that will match the gold work better.
Okay.
So you could do heat transfer vinyl and rhinestone on the skirt, and then do some sew-on rhinestones for the top.
Okay. Well, and as I was saying, we've actually gotten into quite a bit of this already because we're going to talk about part breakdown on this one. And I think here, because like you said, you have talked about quite a bit here. The petticoat. I mean, that's very interesting because it's that high-low skirt style. How do you tackle that?
So, basically, you just have to be a bit more careful than you would with, say, a ball gown petticoat, which is just, strips that are the same width over and over and over, gathered to each other. It doesn't really matter which you make the front and what you make the back.
Right.
Well, the other style, which would be the high-low, maybe, well, no, I don't think you could do that high-low with just playing with the yoke and making the front shorter and the back longer. That might work. Otherwise, you're going to take that shorter in the front, longer in the back, and take that into the strips of fabric that get gathered for the actual petticoat. So instead of doing a giant rectangle, you would have, wide here, taper it down, wide there, or break it apart and have side seams where you have the small rectangle, the big one, and then kind of cut it so that's a gradual change.
Yeah. Okay. So also you had on here was the corset because you said if you wanted the historical bits.
Yeah, if you really wanted to go for that Victorian or Edwardian look, minus the fact that we're being scandalous and showing some leg, you'd probably want to do a corset under that, and that would help you get the shape that it has, because that time period, you had the big shoulders, taper in, flare out. So the corset, it will help you do that pretty easily, actually. And a note on corsets, some people, they hear the word corset and freak out, like, oh no, you're torturing yourself. I actually wore one with my Aurora photo shoot, the one I made, the blue one. And I mean, it was fine. I mean,
it's not like you had something
suffocating. Yeah, the only problem was I didn't lean at the waist.
Yeah.
I didn't bend at the waist, not lean, but you know what I mean.
You didn't. So you wore one, but you didn't try to kill yourself. So.
Yeah, if your corset is painful to wear, that corset's probably not the right kind of corset for your body shape. Which, if you say buy one, because I have one that I made and then one that I bought. The place I bought it from was Orchard Corset, and they have a form. If you don't know what style and size would suit you, fill out the form. You give them some measurements, and they'll be like, okay, based on how long your torso is, your waist measurement, your underbust and your hips, this style will work best for you.
Yeah.
So like for me, the one I have actually has hip ties.
Mm-hmm.
So, and while Lauren, well, I have the long line, so longer torso with hip ties. Lauren's, she has the standard one without hip ties.
Okay.
So, because the thing is, if you are more curvy and you did it without hip ties, that is probably going to squish your sides and it's not going to be comfortable because it's not meant for your shape.
Yeah.
But if you went with the hip tie one, that would be perfectly comfortable to wear.
So we've actually talked quite a bit about the skirt already. The bodice you had on here as well.
So I kind of talked about this a little bit beforehand, that you could find similar patterns through places like Truly Victorian or maybe American Duchess. There's probably others out there. I just don't know their names.
Yeah.
But once you kind of pin down a rough time period, like I said, maybe it's kind of late Victorian or Edwardian. If you Google patterns for that time frame, you would be able to find a pattern somewhere that you could tweak and alter. Or if you decide to make it yourself, like the pattern, you know, the handy dandy cling wrap and tape method. I feel like this is worth noting for Ebon Blade. Allie was made into like a saran wrap monster because we had to do her legs to do the chaps and the leg armor. We had to do the torso for the corset thing and the bolero.
Yeah.
So she was covered in cling wrap and tape.
She was leftovers basically. Yeah.
Yes.
So oh, go ahead.
So yeah, you could go that route for making this, and then again, if you do that, it's very important to do a mock-up to make sure it fits you and to make sure your pattern works. Because sometimes I'll do the pattern that way and I realized, oh, this wasn't really the right shape. I should have done the seam like this, and then it sits better. Okay. But even if you go with the purchase pattern, make the mock-up, figure out how you need to tweak it to fit your shape. Because that pattern is a standardized one. It's not meant for you.
So one last thing on here that you had was actually the hat.
So, you have a couple of options. There's actually a reason why I put the hat on there. Yes, I have thought about making face masks that match my costumes.
Yeah, and I know some people have.
I have lots of ideas on that because I have a cricket and I have lots of random things like sequins and rhinestones, so I can get real extra with it.
Well, I was going to say, as a small aside, there's actually somebody, our friend Piggy Nooka knew of, that actually did masks for the members of Muse and Aquars from Love Live.
Oh, that's
so it was either their symbol or it was actually like their signature. And unfortunately, I didn't get in on it, or else I would have got one in Nozomi. But anyway.
Well, if you want one, I could hook you up with that.
Yeah, I know.
I do have a cricket. It'd be super easy.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so the reason I put the hat is you could go the route of, okay, buy a straw hat or whatever you want it made out of and just put flowers on it, call it a day. Or there was, I think it was at IkiCon, there was some girl that actually made her hat herself.
Okay.
It was like that woven straw-y kind of hat.
Yeah.
And I kind of remembered that when I was doing this. So if you wanted to dive into hat making, now that this is something I know pretty much nothing about. But again, if you were doing it for a contest and wanted to work that in, you totally could.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I mean, I think that person 2 years in a row won an award because the group of them, they did costumes from Black Butler, and Allie probably remembers them because their skit was, well, not their skit, their walk-on was pretty much the same choreography, but the costumes were different each time.
Oh. And
so one time the girl had the hat she made herself, and then the other time she like handmade the lace that was on the petticoat underneath the dress.
Wow.
So it goes back to that, well, how much effort do you want to put in and how extra do you want to be? Because you can learn how to like do your own lace if you get the little like stick thingies and you pin out the pattern. I've seen people do it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's probably a little too crazy for me. I prefer just buying lace. Yeah, I think it was the skirt and like the bloomers all had this nice embroidery and lace and stuff on it.
Holy shit.
So,
But I mean, that would all. I mean, we really wanted to think about, it, especially from a contest perspective. Just as a quick aside, I mean, that's the right kind of extra because it fits.
yeah, well, it's the same like with the gold work on Edelgard. That would totally suit her because she has royalty and she's the freaking emperor, and to some effect, she could be the villain. So, having those extra details of just the I am awesome, I am going to crush you if you oppose me.
Yeah.
That kind of ties into that.
All right. So, when actually, there was a bit of a part breakdown. We've already talked about the dress, like, at length. We didn't talk about the wig, though.
Oh, we didn't.
No.
So, Hannah Alexander, just like with the skirts, how she likes to put an ombre in them, most of her wigs have some kind of ombre or multicolor thing going on. It's not just like the shadows under the hat making it that way. So, like, if you look at Bowsette and Bouzette, those were like that too. Bowsette had a gradient. It went yellow to orange to red on the ponytail. Bouzette kind of had like some purpley tones in it, but it was also kind of silvery. So what I did for that was I took a silver wig, separated out some sections that I dyed purple, and by sections I mean like maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch section of hair. So it was a very small strand, dunked that and did it varying lengths and varying heights throughout the entire wig to get the subtle color change. So that's probably what I would do with this. But what color I would do with it, that's a little harder because the tip of her hair looks kind of white, but the top is more gray and silvery. So maybe start with a white wig and carefully try to make it slightly more gray, but I don't know how well that would work.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I haven't tried to dye gray, like white to be a grayish silver. Honestly, I would probably just get a silver color wig from Arta and call it a day.
Maybe.
Just because of the color. The color's a little bit harder to work with.
Yeah.
It's not like Bouzette where it's like, okay, it's purple. Gotta put a little purple in there. Getting that silvery gray out of a white could be a challenge.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. That's for certain.
Well, or another option to dyeing if you don't want to dye it is, okay, you take the white wig, pull out some of the wefts, and then put in silver wefts and make the color mixture that way.
And just kind of blend it in.
Heck, you could even throw in some light gray and have the 3 colors going on.
Just kind of blend in some fashion, yeah. I could definitely see where that might be a possibility. So
yeah, that would probably be better than trying to dye in a silvery gray color because, like I said, that'd probably be pretty hard to achieve. And I might message Rebecca and see what her thoughts of trying to go ahead and do like a white and gray mix via dyeing.
I was gonna say off the top of my head.
I'm curious if she's done that.
Off the top of my head, I think the one spot that would be the more difficult obstacle would be getting that silver area in between. That would be the hardest part, I think. Because
that's like, is it where you just barely dunk the white in a very diluted gray to just slightly shift the color?
Yeah. Who knows?
I don't know. I'm going to turn my light back on. Oh, that is way too bright.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little better.
Okay. So I think we've covered everything we wanted to do about Sophie. So, and yeah, I knew this was going to probably be a longer stream, but that's okay because there's a lot of information here, folks. So
we're not even at like the most extra costume on this list.
Yes. So next we're going to talk about Sailor Galaxia, but her healed version from Sailor Moon.
Yes. So if you read the manga or actually watched the Sailor Stars arc, you know that Sailor Galaxia is not just the gold monster. She actually has a good version. And what people call this varies. Some people call it the healed Galaxia. Some people call it Princess Galaxia. It's up to you. There's not many images that go with it. There's a few drawings from the manga, and then like the same scene of her standing in a field of flowers in the anime.
Yeah, that was
and
one.
That's all you get to work with.
Yeah, when I was trying to find this particular image, because you had comped it in with something else, that was literally all I was finding was either this or that one scene from Stars.
And that one when she's in the field, it's not even like a really close up one. It's a far away one where I think she's turned around, and then there might be a closer one where she's facing.
Yeah, there is. But it's still, but it was still like a pretty full body shot. But so you can't really get detail and shit. So.
Which I'm actually gonna be right back. So Rob, distraction time, go.
So, oh, excuse me. So hopefully everybody's enjoying this here. I have no idea where the hell Kirsten's going, but this is something we want to do quite a bit more of in the future. We've got some very interesting ways to do that. Kind of like one of our big things is about education. This is going to be one way. We want to do a ton more. Like you said, you should see our list. It's kind of nuts. So actually, I'm kind of curious because I know pretty much like a lot of who I know quite a few people who are here in the chat, but there's actually a number of people I don't recognize, which is kind of interesting. So one thing about our streams, folks, if you have questions, definitely feel free to ask. We don't want this to be about us. We want to, one of the things we want to do is share information, but sometimes there's just stuff we're not going to be able to think about. So.
All right.
No, so what'd you go grab there? I was just kind of curious what that was about.
This is the Bowsette clip-on ponytail thing.
Okay.
Which one of the big things with Galaxia is that hair. So I want to talk a little bit more about the dyeing process, which is why I was like, I'm not going to tell Rob I'm going to go grab something for this, but I'm going to go grab it so we can talk about that.
Well, and that was actually like the big thing for me because I always forget like just literally how big her hair is.
It is. It's ridiculously big.
Yeah, and
because I think it's like it touches the ground when she stands.
Yes, it does. It does.
So, and this ties into the accuracy versus physics.
Right, and that's like one thing I was wondering.
Can you even handle that much hair?
Yeah, because like I know people who've worn wigs.
Wigs get tangled. It's crazy.
What's that?
Wigs get very tangly very easily, even if you have the silky fibers from Arda that are slightly more tangle resistant.
Well, and the thing to me was weight.
Oh yeah, that wig would be heavy.
Yeah, like I remember there was a photo shoot I did years ago where we did actually a big Dragon's Maid or Maid Dragon set and the woman who did Fafnir, like his hair is really fucking long, and they actually ended up having to trim it because it was just like pulling back so bad on her head she was getting a headache.
Oh wow.
So, and that's like...
Yeah, like, I mean, there's things you can do to help long hair. Mm-hmm. So, like, specifically for Galaxia, because I have my wig for this version of her. I have not dyed it yet. But I have a Delilah from Arda, which I think from root to tip, it is 60 inches?
It's 60, yeah. I know that one.
Is it 60? Yeah. All right. Mm-hmm. And I think the color I got is... probably fairy blonde, maybe. Or no, I got honey because I got the silky version, not the classic fiber.
Okay. So
it's a slightly different color than this. Mm-hmm. Which actually, it's the same color as my Aurora wig.
Yeah. Okay.
So, like for that, I was like, okay, that's gonna go past my knees. That's gonna be good. I'm calling it at that. I'm not going for floor length hair.
Yeah. And I mean, realistically, when we look at the volume. Like, how many wefts would you need? How many clips would you have to pull from to even pull that off? I mean.
Well, even with that, like, you could get Arda's new extra long ponytail clip. So this is their standard clip.
Yeah. They
have a shorter one. Well, no, they have two sizes shorter. I think they have the mid and then the really short.
Yeah.
But they have one that's even longer than this.
Well, I was going to say, and we got the long
But they also came out with extra long wefts. Okay. A little while ago.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say because I remember we got the long clip for Jean d'Arc when we did Fate Grand Order.
We didn't get the XL. We got the normal long clip.
Right. So the fact that there's like now an XL of that.
Which I want to get for Sailor Moon upgrades.
Yeah.
Which that will be talked about when we talk about, well, how does this planning come into remakes of costumes?
Yeah.
So there will be more on that.
Yeah.
But back to Galaxia's wig. So already, just with the Delilah that's going to be 60 inches, that wig's going to get heavy and tiring.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that? Well, it comes with a few, I think, maybe one clip built in the front. I don't know if it has side clips. Some of their wigs have sides, others have the center.
Yeah.
But you could easily add whatever one it doesn't have, because they sell extra clips, or you can get like extension clips. Though what I've kind of realized is, so the extension clips, those are the ones that kind of like have the claws and snap in place.
Yeah.
And then some of the Arta wigs have one that's just more like the claw piece.
Yeah.
I don't know what the exact name for that kind of clip thing is.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the claw one more.
Okay.
Because if you use that in combination with a wig grip, you can just slide it underneath the wig grip and it stays in place.
Well, that was actually the one thing I was going to ask about, especially when it comes to styling. Was
actually,
using
I have
wig
the wig
grips.
grip.
Yeah, I was going to say, for those who don't know what these are, this actually came up in a discussion on somebody else's stream, I believe.
It did, because someone was talking about their wigs sliding back a lot.
Right.
And not staying in place.
So basically, I was going to say, what is it? Is it just basically like, is it elastic or what material is it actually?
So it's like a stretched velvety kind of fabric.
Okay.
And what you do, so you put your wig cap on. So your hair is already up, and however you do it. I do French braids. Put your wig cap on. I pin my wig cap like at the sides, just to kind of help it stay in place. Then you take this and put it on like this, but slide it up so that it's, it's not going to hang down in front of the wig. So what I was saying about those clips, like what I did with my Aurora, because it has that center clip, is when you put it on, you just slide it under that. Because this grip will stay in place because of the kind of fabric it is. Like, the friction kind of helps hold it in place. You want to get a little technical? And so if you use this with your wig, it's going to, 1, help it stay in place, 2, help distribute the weight. Because it's now, you can hook it or pin it to this, which goes all the way around your head, instead of just your front hairline.
Yeah.
And when I tried on my Aurora wig after I first did the bangs, I did not glue it down. I just threw a wig cap, this, and I don't even think I used any bobby pins. And it actually held that wig snugly on my head.
Wow, Jesus.
Like, I didn't have to worry about that lace sliding off while I took pictures.
Okay.
So, and it was thanks to this.
Yeah. So I was going to say, so I think we've covered the wig pretty well. I mean, we've just...
Dyeing. We want to talk about dyeing.
Well, I was going to say, in some of that, we kind of actually talked about with Sophie's skirt to a point. Let's talk about that here. So, is there much of a change between doing ombre dyeing for fabric versus ombre dyeing for wigs? I mean, I know there's always a synthetic portion, which could change, depending on the fabric. If you were doing a fabric choice, that was also synthetic. But I was just curious, like, maybe what has been your observations on
I
fabric
would say
wigs?
yes, because fabric, you just want to, dunk it in, dunk it out slowly to get a smooth gradient. If you do that for a wig, it's just going to be like a straight line across.
Right. Okay.
Hair would have more of a variation in height, that I'm going to try to brush this real quick to show the variation that I'm talking about. So that's why you would want to section it out into small pieces and dye it, because you really see it with the orange on this. Okay, so
yeah,
you see how
I can kind of see it here. Yeah, I mean, your lights kind of mess with you, but I can kind of see it. Yeah.
So there's some bits where the orange is higher, somewhere it's lower, and it kind of dips around. And same thing with the orange to red. There's a lot of variation in the height. And I feel like for ombres on wigs like this, it makes it look more natural instead of like oh, I dunked it in the red, now I'm going to dunk it in the orange, and I have straight lines across my head.
Yeah. Well, and
to me, it looks a little silly.
Well, I was going to say, for somebody like Galaxia, I could actually see where that would make, where having the variation would make more sense considering the character she is.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, but also, like, if you curl it and you do that variation, it kind of helps give it more depth to it rather than just a straight color cross, because, you know, there's some of these further in that maybe the orange goes higher than it does on the outside.
Right.
So basically what you would have to do is, what I did was I took pieces about this big, and I had them all, like, separated with little rubber bands, and I, to kind of help remind me how I wanted to do it, I had the rubber bands higher or lower all throughout, like, a range probably this high.
Okay.
And dunked it at varying heights, one at a time, or maybe a few at a time if I grabbed some that were the same height. And that's how I did this entire clip. Okay. So that's how I would do that whole wig too, is section it to get that variation look. And then take the ones that are similar height, do those. Well, I would do the orange first. And actually, there's two ways you could do the orange. Because when I was talking to my friend Rebecca about this, she was saying, well, you want to do the orange so that the red won't overlap on top of it. Meaning, you don't want to do orange to here, even if you did the variation thing, and then go dip in red. Because it could skew the color of the red.
Yeah.
So, but in my tests, it didn't have too much of a difference. But I think I did end up doing the little, like, the dip, so I only had this section of it in it.
Right.
Like that, so that it didn't go too far into the red.
Okay.
So, and it's up to you, like, if you do it with your wefts and you like whichever version better, do it that way.
Yeah.
So that covers, like, the dyeing that you'd want to do the orange and probably vary the heights, and then you're going to do the red and vary the height on that as well.
Yeah.
And I really don't think it took long to get these colors. I'm gonna turn this back on because my screen's making me blue. Oh boy. The lighting in this room kind of sucks when it's darker.
I was gonna say, I keep telling you, it's like, you need to get like 5,000K bulbs in there. I keep telling you that, so someday.
I have this monster.
Oh God.
Okay, that's actually a lot better.
That is actually.
Let me turn my other one on.
That's the sad part. It's like.
So if you're wondering what I'm doing, I have these lights that I use for when I take pictures on my backdrop over there. I have two of them, two umbrella lights. So let me unplug that and plug that in.
Yeah, except your cable's.
Why didn't I think of this sooner?
Except your cable's gonna be in the way is the only problem. Unless you can somehow hide the cable.
I'm working on it.
See, this is the kind of stuff we have to...
I just unplugged my power strip. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Going down.
I was going to say...
What?
This is exactly how our photo shoots go, ladies and gentlemen. I mean... Except usually we're making Luis do this part, but... Oh, good lord. That, like, did some weird shit to your white balance for a moment. Wow.
What?
Oh, for a moment it did some really weird shit to your white balance. Like, it went purple. That was weird.
That's weird. I'm going to lower this a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get it so I'm not going to have a cord across my face.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Louis, shit show. But at least it took 83 minutes. At least it took that long, okay? Okay. So we've talked.
Wow. So yeah, I need to do this normally.
Yeah, no kidding, right? I mean, I've got these two, my Elgato.
Now probably. Okay, this still looks a little weird, but you can see the variation a little better.
Yeah, a little bit. So, so we've covered the wig dyeing quite a bit. So let's talk about the actual dress patterning here for Galaxia.
All right. Look at the picture again. So, compared to the other things we've talked about, this is by far the simplest one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, there's not crazy detail going into this. However, that doesn't mean you should skip out on the mock-up phase, whether you try to pattern it yourself or you find an Empire Waist evening gown that you alter.
Mm-hmm.
So, where's it going with this? I've heard a couple of different judges say this, that, some people think that the big extra costume is always going to beat the simple costume.
Right.
That's not really true, because a simple costume is going to show mistakes far easier than the thing that has rhinestones and glitter all over it, because that could hide it.
Mm-hmm.
So getting a nice, clean look to a simple costume is actually probably going to be a bit difficult.
Yeah.
Because it would be so obvious if it's not.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was going to say, and that's always one thing, kind of going back to competitions when we discuss this, what's kind of, well, let's say for Galaxia, what would be like the right kind of extra? Would it just be, good tailoring skills, good sewing skills? Would that be the way to go, or is there, maybe little things to consider to maybe give that a little more oomph in not even necessarily in a contest, just people looking at it?
I did think about this some for Galaxia, and so if you look, there's like some lines that come down from that waistline and trace down the skirt, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what I was thinking for that is, well, what if instead of just being, I don't know, let's say matte satin, because I like matte satin.
Right.
So instead of just that for the skirt, you also have a nice lightweight sheer fabric on top of it to give it more of a flowy, like mystical kind of look. Because I mean, when she's shown in this dress, she's in some flower field imaginary land.
Right.
Right. So maybe having that flowy layer on top will help get that that magical,
like the kind of ethereal, an ethereal.
Yes,
kind
ethereal.
Of
That's the word I wanted, but could not think of. That's why I have you here, for words.
Words are difficult. So, and also real quick, because you had mentioned this on here, and admittedly, I don't know what your thoughts were with this here specifically. You mentioned accessories, though really the only thing I'm seeing is the earrings. So I didn't know.
So what I was thinking on this was earrings, because you could resin cast them yourself or just go with whatever ones.
Yeah.
But also, even though you don't see it, so a lot of the Sailor Scouts in their princess designs, like on their the straps, there's something there.
Okay.
So maybe you could design something that suits Galaxia to put there, to dress it up slightly, if you didn't want to do the plain dress look. But the other thing I thought of that could tie into other Sailor Moon designs is, say at the Empire Waist seam, you wanted to do, so let me actually pull up the color, because I have a few fabric samples for this dress.
Okay.
So say you wanted to do, where the heck is it? So I think I was thinking probably more of the champagne rather than the beige.
Okay.
So if for the champagne, you wanted to do a very light gold beading along that Empire Waist, kind of like the beading that Serenity has, as well as Chibi Moon, that'd probably be a nice small detail that just adds a little bit more, but not, I would not bedazzle this costume like crazy.
Right. Okay.
That doesn't suit her character.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because she's always been kind of like always like a clean character in terms of her design. So.
But I do think that maybe just that slight beading around there and the little things at the straps, that would probably be, in combination with the sheer layer on the skirt, what I would do to dress it up a little bit.
Okay.
But I would not go too sparkle crazy. Like maybe on the sheer layer, if you wanted to put a few rhinestones, sure, but don't go bonkers and don't put the color that sticks out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
it doesn't suit her character.
All right, so I think we've covered Galaxia here, and this. So the fourth character you've chosen, there's quite a bit here. So this
Yes,
is
there
actually
is.
Noflutter's redesign of Anastasia,
Hmm. This is
and
something I really, really want to make, but it is such a repeat till cry costume.
yeah, and actually I'm going to
It's so
resize that
pretty.
there just to make it a little bigger. Why not? What the hell? So, God damn it, go there. So one thing you had mentioned about was especially fabric options.
Hmm.
Wow, why is he doing it that way? That's so
So
dumb.
the fabric options in this kind of tie back to what we talked about with Edelgard with the whole what suits royalty.
Mm-hmm.
So that would go back to probably a nice matte satin. If you wanted to use a silk. That's just going to be a lot because it's a ball gown. You could even use a dupioni. One of our friends, Sonia Blade Cosplay, she did the Hannah Alexander Anastasia and used a dupioni, which actually have samples of the fabric she used.
Okay.
And it turned out beautiful, and it worked really well for that costume. Let me try to find them. Yes, I think she used this gold right here. This should be
Okay.
the one. So,
Wait a minute, was
and
that
then
the one she wore at IkiCon? Because I thought she did the I didn't know she did that version. Oh no,
she did the Hannah Alexander, not the Noflutter.
Oh, okay.
Different Anastasia.
Okay.
But the fabric she used is a dupioni, which would be something I would consider for this.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I mean, which makes sense because we both saw that version of Anastasia in person, so yeah, I could definitely see where that would.
I really liked that gold that she chose to use.
Oh yeah,
I
it was
actually
really
got
good.
some of that, and that's what I'm going to use for the skirt trim on Zelda.
Yeah, it was an amazingly good choice.
Mm-hmm. And it looks under lights like this. It looks very nice.
It looks really good. Yeah. So he put in here would need a lot of fabric.
Yeah, and so I put that because some people don't really realize how much fabric goes into a ball gown, and your standard ball gown is probably going to be at least 10 yards of fabric.
Yeah.
And that's just like a top and a skirt, not necessarily a skirt that has two layers like this one, because you have the yellowy gold layer and then the pink layer.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know some people, when they do skirts like this, they would just do the pink as a panel sewn to the gold. But I would make like two layers of skirt. So I do a full pink skirt and then the gold skirt, because personally I like gold more than yellow. So you could argue that the design is drawn to have either of these colors. But yeah, so I would go light gold for this.
Well, and I was gonna say,
and that's gonna be a lot of fabric.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, and real quick, the whole thing about like the panel versus two skirt bit here, to me, the two skirt idea makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at the details in, say like the ribbons that hang down from the mid part, to me that indicates more it's a full skirt, not a panel.
I would agree with that, but I know some people say you aren't making this for a contest, so maybe that's when they're going to try to do something like that. I mean, that's fine.
Right.
But when you go to do nice twirly photos, it'd look nicer if those layers weren't connected, because you could have one fly up a little bit more than the other and get more dimension to what's going on.
Well, and also to that point here, let's talk about these sheer bits that are there.
Yeah, so there's actually a sheer layer to that skirt that is pretty much the same as the gold layer.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have, I don't know, say 8 yards of pink. You're going to have 8 yards of gold and then the same amount of sheer. That's a guess. It's probably going to take more than 8 yards because of that brain. I mean, that skirt, that outer skirt, I used 4 yards to make that. Okay. Because it has a decent sized train on it.
So, and actually for the sheer part, what would be the fabric choice? Because I'm just kind of curious what you would go with that there.
So I would probably use like what I used for my Glinda petticoat. This is like a crystal organza or something.
Oh, I was wondering if
you... So it's not quite white. It has a little bit of shimmer to it.
Okay.
and it's soft.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about organza.
I feel like it would but in a yellowy or gold color, it would pair well for that dress.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't just be a solid, it has a little bit of a shimmer to it. Okay. And it goes for the princessy look.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about patterning on this one.
Well, there's a little bit more on the fabric.
Oh, okay.
That little sub point is very important on this one.
Okay.
So something that I will talk about more is samplers and all of that, but we'll save that for after Anastasia.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to work with fine fabrics, especially if there's something like this, you need to be very careful with how you plan to sew it together. Because like organza and other sheer things that are very delicate can easily pick apart and unravel at a seam.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to make sure, however you decide to sew it, that one, you're not going to cause a lot of pulls. So you want to make sure that you have the right kind of needle, the right stitch length, right tension, and then that it's strong enough for it. So like for this, I went ahead and serged all of my seams to try and help prevent unraveling.
Right.
You could also put like a bias tape on it.
Okay.
For like the ends. So again, I serged the end of it, but you could have put like a bias tape there to seal the fabric in. Okay. So especially with the shears, because they are easy to unravel. If you step on it wrong, you could just bust open a seam.
Yeah.
It's very important that you go through a testing phase to figure out what is the best way to sew it together.
All right. So yeah, I'm sorry I missed that there. So let's actually talk about patterning now.
Yes.
I know this is a big thing. You've been researching, especially for ball gowns yourself. So.
Yeah. So for this one, because you see that there's a huge train and the back of her dress is really like drawn out, right? Mm-hmm. So which that's kind of like the live action Cinderella dress.
Right.
So for that, what they used was an elliptical cage.
Mm-hmm.
So what it is, so in the front, it's a little bit more straight down, and then in the back, it trails out.
You got that curve, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so instead of like the Glinda one, which does this, like a bell, this is kind of straight-ish, and this goes like that.
Yeah.
So that would be the kind of cage for this dress that I would say to go with. And then on top of that, you're going to need to have a petticoat meant for an elliptical cage, because the petticoat for Glinda is meant for a fairly round cage, not an elliptical one, because that back edge is longer. So if you put this on that, it might hit the right spot on the front, but in the back, it will look too short.
Yeah. So
you wouldn't want that. And part of the researching phase would probably lead you to like Truly Victorian, because they have cage patterns. I think they have 3 of them, if I remember correctly. They have the walking cage, which is what I used for Glinda, the round cage. So that's similar to Glinda's, but I think it's a little bit more like A-line rather than a bell.
Okay.
And then they have the elliptical. But they also have elliptical skirt patterns. I don't remember if they have one specifically meant for petticoats, but that would be one place to start to figuring out how to do that, or looking into like the live action Cinderella, because there's videos and pictures behind the scenes of them putting together that petticoat.
Okay.
And there's a couple of people who have made it, and I think they have there's one blog that talks about it, and then some YouTube videos that talk about it.
All right.
So that would definitely be resources for this costume.
All right. So I know some of the bits you mentioned here would actually kind of fall under the general ball gown research, but there's one very interesting point I want to talk about, because it does kind of blend into cosplay as a whole. How to tackle the sewing on this and not get burnt out, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah. This, while you could try to do something like this, say in a month or 2, I would say don't do that and make this a more long-term project. Because if you try to do this all in a month, you are going to be nonstop sewing. And then personally, I know if like the whole construction process and detailing is that like con crunch deadline,
Yeah.
it's not going to come out as nice as I want it to.
Yeah.
So that's when I would say draw the project out. Like with Glinda, I could have probably had Glinda done by now, but I'm taking my time to do more research and testing and giving myself time to do all the sequencing because, I mean, sequencing is not hard, but you don't always want to do it.
It's
You
a
know,
little tedious. Yeah.
it's tiring.
Yeah.
So, like, I keep it as a project for, okay, say maybe I'm watching Netflix and I'm just like, okay, well, let's do a little embroidery or a little sequencing. That's usually where I save my projects for that is when I'm just watching a show.
Right.
But as far as like for the whole thing to prevent burnout, I'd focus on one piece at a time instead of trying to tackle the whole thing. And something important for ball gowns is starting from the layers closest to you and then going out.
Okay.
So that means your undergarments. So if you want to go historical, that would mean a chemise, bloomers, and a corset, which the corset is very important for a ball gown.
Yeah.
Because of the weight. Maybe what I need to do is figure out how much Petticoat Mountain weighs.
Oh, God.
It's all like ridiculous, but I mean, it's pretty big and it's 56 yards of fabric.
Right, yeah.
So the point of the corset, it's one, it helps give you the shape you want, depending on how you make your corset. Two, when you put that cage and petticoat, it helps distribute all of that around you. Yeah. So that, you know, it's not all on your knees. It's like, it does like what the wig grip does for your head.
Yeah.
Basically. So yeah, it's very, especially with a fluff monster like that, the corset's going to be important for, you know, not killing your knees and your back while wearing this.
Well, I was going to say, and actually that does lead into some of the next point here, which was around the ball gown construction, which you kind of covered, you know, to a degree already. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add to some of the points you already brought up, so...
What I mentioned earlier about having your shoes early in the costume process. For ball gowns, that's even more important because so you can't just make your petticoat and then make your cage, right? Because your petticoat's going to go over that, and that's going to change the length needed for it to hit the ground or just above the ground. And so the same thing with the shoes. If you want your dress to be an inch off the ground so it doesn't drag in the front, you're going to have your shoes before you do that.
Yeah.
Like, because I actually waited to start my petticoat until I had the shoes so I can make sure that length from where I wanted the waist of it to be over the petticoat, over the cage down to the floor was the right length for the petticoat. Because without that, it changes that arc. So your arc length is different. Build a chair into it. I actually can't hide a chair under my my cage. I can actually hide underneath my cage and petticoat.
Yes.
I have a video of it. It's funny.
She could like seriously like solid snake.
Like I slid on under it and you can't tell I'm under it except for the fact when I hit the dress form stand because it's in the middle of the thing. If it wasn't for that, I could be under there and no one would know. But yeah, so having your shoes by the time you finish your cage and corset is important to make sure that the length is right for the petticoat.
Yeah. And
then after you have the petticoat, that's when you're going to want to start figuring out the skirts. And like that pink one, I would probably do like a half skirt mock-up of it to figure out the drape. And I say a half because that's probably enough to work with to give you the idea for the front.
Right.
The back's going to be a little different because it's going to be elliptical.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Maybe you'd want to do like half as in like from center front to center back. That would probably be okay. Or you could do 3/4 so you could have whole front and then to half of the back. I don't know. I haven't done an elliptical one yet, so I don't know how much you need to take into consideration when doing that.
So apparently, Khajiit is bored by our stream.
Oh, Khajiit is adorable.
So, from cosplay pockets to cosplay chair, that's how we roll, Louise. So, and actually, probably need to like kind of speed up a little bit because I do want to talk about our remakes here. So
yes. So
let's. So we've talked quite a bit about beading and rhinestoning embroidery. Mm-hmm. This was one actually that was interesting. Was fabric flower making, because that's a technique we've never talked about.
Yeah, I've done it, but we haven't talked about it. So rather than going with like a fake flower on that skirt, because you see like at the waist and then like the center front of it, like where those little swags are, there's little roses there. So rather than going with a fake one, I would probably make little ones, which it's depending on what kind of flower, it changes how you do it. But for the most part, you take a rectangular piece, fold it in half.
Yeah.
And then you like roll it or fold it a certain way to get the flower. So like these were just a rectangle that I did, and I like gathered it at the base and then flattened it out a little.
Yeah, because I remember I saw some of the work, a little bit of the work in progress, but like I said, we've never talked about it specifically as a technique. So
I might have now I won't go dig in my sewing box. I think there's probably a few of those flowers in my sewing box, but I won't go dig.
Yeah, I won't worry about it for now.
But yeah, so that would be one thing that's different from what we've talked about, because we've talked about embellishments in terms of rhinestones, beading, which this would have quite a bit of that kind of stuff going on. So, and then, carefully figuring out how you're going to pattern that skirt. You're going to want to test it to make sure that those little drapey bits are doing what you want, which actually probably for those drapey bits, I would do like a half circle high-low thing going on.
Okay. Because
I think that would fall right. And I say that because of the Morticia sleeves I did for Lauren. You remember how they kind of flow down?
Yeah.
So those, it's like a high-low circle skirt, basically, but it's for your arm.
Yeah.
And with how that fell, that would probably work well for those little drapey bits on the skirt. So have a circle that, short radius here, and then as you go down, you get to a long radius.
Right. So, like I said, I want to kind of speed up a little bit here, but so there is one specific thing I want to talk about here, because like I said, this is a big thing, especially for you researching, doing ball gowns, is mobility, because that's always a big thing, especially in these, and there's very different considerations for a ball gown versus, say, armor.
Actually, as soon as I posted pictures of the petticoat on Glinda, people were asking me, can you sit and can you get through doorways?
Yeah.
Yes and yes. I've actually sat in this chair, which has little arms on it, with my Cajun petticoat on.
Well, there you go.
Because the cage, it has steel bones in it, but they're really flexible. So it just squishes, and shifts how it is for you to sit. And same thing with doors. It might normally be like this, but it can squish, and you can get through the door.
Yeah.
And then, if you want to talk about, well, how do you go to the bathroom? Well, that's probably going to be when you might want to look in, tricks that brides use with their big dresses. Because some of them have, it's kind of like an underskirt thing that's like a bag that they can flip up to hold the skirt with. Yeah. So, I don't know all the tricks. I've just seen that one because there's, someone I follow talked about that little, flippy bag thing.
I didn't know that was a thing, actually. And there's a reason why I'm resizing this, but you'll see here soon. So, yeah, I was going to say with that, there's very different things we have to think about. For, like I said, ball gown versus...
Yeah, part of it could just be looking up, I mentioned brides. There's brides who have gigantic dresses.
God, yes.
You can find something on the internet probably that addresses the mobility questions.
Yeah.
Like I said, sitting in doorways, that's easy. Your cage will just squish on through. And then the big one is going to be you not killing your knees because of the weight. That's going to be the corset that helps distribute.
Yeah. So, so as far as like potential new costumes, we've talked about quite a bit. So I
Hmm.
actually want to talk about potential remakes, and there was actually one we had shot a remake of. So let's go into that there. So this is actually Briar Rose slash Aurora from Disney's Sleeping Beauty, and on the left here is your version one version, and
Hmm.
on the right, and this was a pick your mom took, is version two. So
Yes.
what were the design changes you made between the two, and what was like the push to do so on both on that?
So like the first one I did, that was just a quick costume for our very first Comic-Con. So that was in 2015 when I started to make costumes.
Okay.
Um, and as I've learned, cough cough, thanks to the Cosmic Coterie for addicting me to circle skirts. Circle skirts twirl so nicely, and
Yes,
they're
they do.
amazing whenever you can use them. So that first one, it was kind of like a trapezoid kind of thing. So it didn't really flow and didn't twirl.
Right.
So that was one of the things is I was like, okay, I want something more princessy. So that means it's a full circle skirt that can twirl around, and I also made a petticoat to go underneath it because she has like little lace bits at the bottom that you see. So I did a full petticoat that fluffs out just as much as the circle skirt does when you twirl. As far as the bodice goes, I definitely know a lot more now because that other one, like it had boning in it, but it didn't really like have enough structure. Because
Yeah.
you can see the bottom. It was a nice point to it. It just doesn't sit flat. Which I have it sitting over there. One moment. I see it, so I need to grab it. Um, so like I said, it has the V shape to it, but this thing is really flimsy because it is two layers with boning sewn to the lining. When what I should have done was put a strength layer in there, so a
Okay.
heavier weight fabric. Some people use like a heavy cotton denim or a cotil. That cotil is like what you use in corsets, so it's very heavy duty. I don't remember what I used for Aurora V2. It was probably just a heavy fabric I had. This one did not have that. As you can tell, this thing is flimsy as all heck.
Yeah, I can see it like flop around as you're just like.
Like the fabric is nice because it has a subtle like leaf pattern on it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just
Well, and that
you
was
see the
actually one thing I was going to point out because like some of the design on the fabric you used for the corset in V2, I think it lended
bodice,
or
not a
bodice. Thank you,
corset.
thank you.
There's a
Um,
difference.
I think that lended more towards the design,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it worked in
Yeah,
that regard.
part of it, I was like, well, I want to make it slightly fancier by doing subtle details that make sense. So, Briar Rose, there's a lot of roses in the
Mm-hmm.
movie and the thorns and all of that kind of stuff in Sleeping Beauty. So, that's when I saw that fabric. It has leaves and flowers on it. And I was like, well, this is suitable. Why
Yeah.
not? The lace, I think, has little flowery designs in it, probably.
Yeah.
And then like the trim I added on the sleeves, there's two laces. There's the wide lace and then a short one that has that black on it. Those little black things are little flowers. So
Okay.
it's kind of a theme that I worked into the entire thing.
Which makes it, like I said, the
Hmm.
right kind of extra. The right kind of
Hmm.
extra. So this was so this is a couple of cosplays we've actually talked about. And we knew it was going to be a V2 at some point, but I'm going to split them up for reasons. Is so we're talking about Sailor Galaxia, or is I in my head when I was writing the notes, I almost put in Decepticon Galaxia in my head. um, so, and one of the things you had put in here as far as the upgrades was about mobility and comfort.
Yeah, so what might surprise you is Galaxia is actually really hot to wear.
Actually, I'm not surprised. I'm not
Well,
surprised by
because
that.
like Lauren was like, "What do you mean you're like roasting? It's like a tank top thing going on." Well, what I did for the top to make it pointy and armor like is that's foam with spandex on it.
Yeah,
So that's most of my top that can't be breathable.
yeah.
And then also leaning over, like I can't really easily bend at the waist in that.
No,
costume,
you can't.
that
I remember that.
piece.
It's like I said, it's like the cosplay pockets problem. It's like, oh, I dropped that. Can you get it?
Mm-hmm. And then that actually another part of that is how I did the little boot toppers.
Mm-hmm.
Next time I'm probably gonna actually like attach them to the boots rather than a foam thing that like velcros on, because that little foam band comes undone so easily.
Huh,
and it's always like, someone fix my boot.
Well, I could see that, especially if you're walking around.
You've done that. Luis has done it. Allie did it for me at Katsucon. Rizuki and Angel Moon had to do it as well. You know, Galaxia's needy. And then like the bracers, because I didn't have thin foam at the time. I like sanded down thicker foam because I was like, well, I need to make it work. So I would probably actually use Warbler for those and make them a sleeker look rather than so chunky.
Okay.
And a big change I would make to the top is less foam.
Okay.
Because like she is kind of pointy, so I would keep like this section, like the foam doing this thing to make that bevel.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have the full top done that way. And what gave me an idea for how to do it is actually the Sierra Miu, because the Sierra Miu, they have a piece that's like right here and here. So it has like 3 sides, but it just like buckles onto the top. So you get the pointy look, but like you can easily bend at the waist.
Yeah,
and it's not up on your shoulders, so you can reach and do whatever you want in that costume.
Yeah, I was going to say, sadly, I've not seen that particular musical yet. So.
Oh, I love the movement finale. It is like my favorite Sierra Miu.
I was going to say, I need to go watch it.
And there's so many costumes from it I want, because I'm like, oh, I need Super Chibi, I need Galaxia, I need Cosmos. Lauren needs ESM, she needs Supermoon.
Yeah.
And she could also make an adorable Iron Mouse.
So, and actually, to that point, let's. This was one you said you wanted to remake, but it was a little dialed back compared to Galaxia, which was ESM. But the thing you put on here was like actually upgrading the sewing involved.
Yeah. So, because this was what the 3rd fuku I made.
Yeah, I believe so.
And then on the list, because I have a whole list of upgrades. I think it might be on this phone, but it's a very long list of things I want to change about Galaxia and ESM.
There's a very long list, and we're talking about you. Are we fucking surprised?
So most of that list is related to the sewing. So one of the things was, okay, Lauren had mentioned before that, you know, when she wears her shapewear or when she wears some of the bras, she gets lines that show through the spandex on the top because it's a 1-layer spandex. I was like, okay, what if I do a lined one? So it's 2 layers of spandex to try and soften whatever lines you get.
Right.
Which I did have to actually make that adjustment to the current ESM because what was it like? Less than 2 days before I left from Katsucon, I got ESM back from the dry cleaners, and the white that was kind of grubby turned gray.
Yeah.
So I was frantically removing everything from that top to put a new top on it.
Yeah, I remember
that. But that idea actually worked well for making it lined. And then something else I want to do, one of the big things, is play more with the stripes. Okay. So instead of doing the belt, because one of the original reasons I did the stripes as part of the belt is that I was like, okay, well, I might have to like attach the wings to that at the back to kind of help hold it in place. I didn't end up doing that.
Okay.
So now I'm like, well, I could figure it out actually sewing those stripes to the fuku and making them have more of that dramatic look that they have in the art.
Okay.
And then there's actually a cool glove trick that the Geeky Seamstress showed Lauren and I at Katsucon, which works for anyone doing ESM. So her gloves were in 2 pieces. There was the arm part here that had the point, and she like finished it with that red stripe, so that was like a tube. All right.
Okay.
And then she had white gloves that would slide under that at the end, so she could pull her gloves off. And 1, not make her gloves dirty. 2, be able to use phones easily.
Wow.
I was like, oh
smart.
my gosh, you are a freaking genius. Exactly. So that's something I want to do. And then Probably the skirts, instead of just 2 circle skirts, I might do 3 to make her a huge fluffy cupcake. But on the other hand, I may not use horsehair braid as wide as I used on ESM V1.
Okay.
Because because that fabric is pretty light. The horsehair braid foofs it out a lot.
Yeah.
So, and I may also go for like a matte satin instead of that satin I picked.
Okay. So one thing I had brought up when we were initially talking about this idea for the stream was, because you've made, let's face it, a fuck ton of fukus, okay? So
how many have I made?
Because you've had Moon, Super Moon.
I'm thinking.
Pluto, ESM.
I've done 7.
Chibi.
7.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 in all.
So there was one.
Some of them are different versions, but
right. So there was one thing I was very interested in, because I know you have made so many. Was what were the and at the time I was thinking like fabric changes, and I'm going to refer to a couple of other images here real quick. So this one is of I believe this is Super Sailor Moon in Sailor Pluto.
Super Pluto.
Oh, Super Pluto. Okay, thank you.
Super Pluto. You
And
can't
then
see the butt bow and the little sleeve things, but it is a Super
thank
Pluto.
Thank you. And then also was your Eternal Chibi. So, and one thing I had brought up was, okay, was there like a ton of changes, especially from a fabric standpoint? And you said no, there wasn't.
Yeah, the fabric for Eternal Chibi, it's not a matte satin. It was just a satin that I had on hand because that costume is kind of a random one, so that was a shift. But like overall weight of that fabric was really similar to the first 2 fukus I made.
Okay.
And then the white spandex, that's the same stuff. Except wait, no, Eternal Chibi is not the one I did the lining for. It was the normal Chibi Moon costume that I made earlier this year that I have not worn more than once. It's sitting on that rack.
Okay, for the fact that we have like regular Moon, Pluto, and regular Chibi, and probably in Super Sailor or Super Moon.
Yeah, Lauren has all 3 versions of Moon.
We got photos to do one, so we could fucking do them.
Yes.
So, well, and to that point, just real quick, because like, damn, it's 6:02 already. Fuck.
Oh wow.
Maybe
we might want to make the remake thing like its own little.
And it might have
thing.
To be. And so
you're just barely touching the surface.
Yeah, there's a lot here, and I kind of expected maybe this to be at least 90 minutes, and we went 2 hours, kind of like World Without Cons. But
hey man, I was actually wanting to talk more about some of those costumes we went through, but
yeah,
there's only so much time. However, if you do happen to have any questions on those 4 costumes I talked about, message me, because I have a lot of ideas for those, and I cannot talk about all of them.
And one thing I'm going to do, and it's probably going to take me a bit because I'm going to have like a lot of timestamps I'm going to have to make, is I'll get it up to YouTube, and I want to make sure like really highlight various sections of all the costume discussion here. So there is a couple of things we're working on here. One thing that really excited us about doing even the stream idea about cosplay planning is bringing in others. Like people out, like our friends out of the community, and actually see how they would do things, but they would not know what characters we're talking about. Only I would.
So like, the 4 that I talked about, the reason I picked those, and actually it started from a poll of 8, and Instagram helped pick what ones we talked about. But those were all images I just had saved on my phone because I was like, whatever, let me just put some things together and go with it.
Yeah.
But I was talking to one of my friends, and we kind of came up with what if we opened it to where on the MTA Instagram, so that's something only Rob has access to, that people could submit characters, and if it's a character with different outfits, say what outfit, maybe send a picture so he knows what image to go grab. And he would get a list together and then pick a couple from that list and present that to guests and I during a live stream. So we wouldn't have done any research ahead of time, and you guys would get to hear like the thoughts as we kind of think them through. Like all 4 of these costumes I've done a good chunk of thought process on them already. So
Yeah, it's something we're very looking forward to, and like one of our big things is bringing in knowledgeable people that would be willing to think things through, and
mhm,
really just have fun with the idea. That's the whole point. And
mhm.
actually, let me go back just to our two windows here.
Yeah,
So
and I
that's
do have one person that's already told me she wants to be in it, and it
yeah.
would be great. You know who it is.
Yeah, I do. So we'll keep that under wraps here. So one other thing we are working on is we're trying to plan out more streams for the MTA channel here and also out to YouTube. Is we want to do more crafting streams, but we are going to need more setup for this because we want to do it in a really good way.
Mhm.
And for the time being, Kirsten's going to be the one who will kind of drive that a little bit. We're still trying to think through the technical end, and especially with addressing questions that come into chat here. But one of the things we're going to need is some help in getting a good webcam. Like, actually, Kirsten, can you do me a favor? Can you actually put your cup to the side again so I can kind of point out one of the things? So Kirsten had to get a
Or
webcam.
actually, it's more obvious when I move my
Or
laptop.
do that, yes, there is that. Holy fuck. Yeah,
My laptop is straight, yet you can see that curve. And also, I mean, if you compare my image to Rob's, it's clearly a difference in quality.
right. So one of
Really
the
obvious,
things
but
so one of the things we want to do is actually get Kirsten a better webcam, not more for actually showing what she's crafting on,
mhm.
especially for any webcam that actually has good autofocus, like stuff from Logitech and stuff like that. So if you would like to see more of that and help us get along to that, and I really need to actually put together a parts breakdown so people know this. We do actually have a tip jar, and I just put it in the chat, and I'll put it in the show notes later. So if you would like to help us with that, please donate. We have one-time donation options. We have monthly donation options. We're looking at other support platforms for once. We're still trying to figure out what in the world that's going to look like,
Mhm.
and part of the craft stream is part of that.
Well, yeah,
So
because if you do decide to donate or through those other platforms when we get them out, we want to make sure that you guys are getting something out of it too. So the
yeah,
idea with the webcam is that, some nice high quality crafting stuff. So say I'm doing gold work, I could have a camera showing you exactly what I'm doing. Because if I keep doing this, you really can't see too much of what I'm actually doing. So we do want, we don't just want to take money and run. We want to give something to show you something and give
yeah,
you more content to have,
yeah.
whether that be resources or, um, you know, tutorials and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So, and like I said, if you have ever seen if you had seen our stream ideas list, it's still nuts, and we've only gotten through a small way
Well, and
through
I
it.
mean, from today alone, there's multiple more build offs of this. Like we said, the remakes, and
Yeah,
we didn't even really get to do the comparison that I wanted to do of mock ups to samplers because that's very important. So I might see if we want to maybe next week do something, and if I can convince one of my friends to hop in on that, I'm going to talk to you about this later.
okay.
Well, because it's mock-ups and samplers are different, and they're both very important.
Yeah.
And then there was the remake discussion, and then there's other things that we can always talk more about, whether that's the armor making, the 3D printing. We didn't even talk about leatherwork,
Yeah, I mean
full gowns. So
there's
there's
a
way more information we want to give you guys that we haven't done yet.
oh yeah. And I mean, I've even thought about a little bit more about from the photography angle, honestly. So, yeah, there's a lot we can talk about, and
Hmm.
right now, let's face it, we've got the fucking time. So, but we wanted to
Yes,
do we
we.
want to do it to help you. That's the whole point of this. So, Kirsten, I don't know if you have anything more you want to add to this, because shit, like I said, it's been 130 minutes at this point. So,
Um, just like I said not that long ago, if you have questions about anything that we talked about, because I did say a lot and not everything got a whole bunch of time, feel free to message either Rob on the Make Them Awesome stuff. He's Make Them Awesome on everything, or you can find me as Tacocat Cosplay On Instagram, it's Tacocat_cosplay. Just message me and I will gladly answer whatever questions you have.
Definitely.
Because it was a lot of information and it probably is like information overload.
It is a bit, and I think that's that's just kind of how we work. We just like come up with one small idea and just
it's like a gas and quickly expands.
I was gonna say with that, and actually that segues very nicely in my ending, even though I still need to figure out the fucking music thing. I gotta figure that out.
Wow, Rob, you need to get on that.
I think it's honestly because I never know how long I'm going to outro. That's the biggest problem. So maybe at some point, once we get an idea I have for support methods, we'll figure that out. But
ideas?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. So, but anyway, leading into all that, here's the most important thing, folks. Get dumb ideas, make them awesome. We'll see you next time.